This is not exactly the way that I envisioned celebrating my first Triduum as a pastor, with very few people in live, but many separated and watching on the internet. My first assignment, the pastor there would have a theme every year for the Triduum, and he would preach on a theme, sort of trying to connect each of the homilies during the Triduum on Holy Thursday, on Good Friday, and then for the Easter Vigil. And so last year, whenever I was able to do the Triduum at St. Edmund's, I took on that same practice, and I plan to try to do it again this year. And I've been thinking about the current situation, right? Our faith cannot be removed from our everyday lives. And so the theme that kept coming up and the idea that I had is to focus on loneliness. To focus on being alone, on our solitude. And it might be a little interesting. You might not think it's going to be the most uplifting, but if you stick with me through Sunday, through Saturday evening, and through Sunday, I think you'll see that it is a very hopeful thing. So today we're celebrating Holy Thursday. We're celebrating the Mass of the Lord's Supper. And on Holy Thursday, the Church instructs us to focus on two things. The institution of the Most Holy Eucharist, which Jesus did at the Last Supper. And along with that, with the institution of the Eucharist, is the institution of the priesthood. This handing over, this handing on of the power to celebrate this sacred meal to his apostles, who were the first bishops and priests. And so I want to focus first on the loneliness of Christ in the Eucharist. The loneliness of Christ in the Eucharist. So Jesus, we say, is true God and true man, right? Fully God, fully man. And so he would have known everything that was going to unfold. But just because he knew what was going to happen doesn't mean that he was saved from feeling human feelings. And so he would have experienced an array of feelings, and one of those, maybe the most present feeling, would have been that of loneliness. Right? Think of Jesus at the Last Supper. He had done so much over the 3 years of his public ministry. He had performed many miracles. He had drawn the apostles from their regular lives to follow him. They had performed those miracles in their presence. He had performed some of the miracles for them. He had changed their lives. He had drawn them to him. He had prayed with them. He had shown them his innermost thoughts. And yet they still just didn't get it. Right? Peter, the first pope, at the Last Supper, is arguing with Jesus. Right? You're not going to wash my feet. Jesus is preparing to suffer and to die, and Peter still just doesn't get it. He argues with Jesus. He doesn't want to let Jesus serve, which is precisely what Jesus says he came to do. Right? Not to be served, but to serve. And then also, right, Judas leaves early in order to betray Jesus. He leaves early in order to make money. Right? We hear that Judas is paid for handing Jesus over. And so Jesus had this intense loneliness that he was going through as he was preparing to suffer and to die. And Jesus knew, as he was instituting the Eucharist at the Last Supper, he knew that the Blessed Sacrament throughout the years would be disrespected, would be desecrated. Right, that people would steal his body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Blessed Sacrament in order to do horrible things with it. He knew that he would be abandoned, that in tabernacles throughout the world, he would remain there by himself. Right? That people would not come to pay him a visit. But he gave himself to us anyway. He instituted the Eucharist anyway. He was willing, and is still willing, to endure loneliness so that we could have him in the Eucharist. Right? Imagine the loneliness that Jesus must have experienced. And I think that this is fitting for us during this time because many of us are experiencing a type of loneliness, a type of solitude. Right? We're confined to our homes. You are experiencing a Eucharistic loneliness, right? Unable to come to Mass, unable to receive our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. And so you are, in a very real way, experiencing this Eucharistic loneliness. Now, it would be great to receive Jesus, right? There's nothing better. But I think we might be missing something if we don't take advantage of this opportunity. Because you are experiencing something of the loneliness that Jesus experienced, that Jesus continues to experience. Right? We can't miss out on that. The loneliness that you feel, the loneliness that I feel in not having you here, in not having the fullness of the celebration with the people present, is a fraction of the loneliness that Christ himself experienced at the Last Supper through his passion, that he experiences today whenever he is neglected in the Blessed Sacrament. We also celebrate today the institution of the priesthood. And so I do want to reflect a moment on the loneliness of the priesthood. And as I thought of this, I kind of questioned whether or not I should do it, but I think I need to because it's something I've been praying about, and it may give you an insight into the life of the priest. Now, the priesthood can be, and I think if we understand it in the correct sense, the priesthood ought to be lonely at times. Right? Now, not in a sense where it kind of makes us go into a state of depression, but that we need to experience loneliness at times. Now, why do I say that? Because we say that the priest is an alter Christus, that the priest is another Christ. So if the priest is another Christ, then the priest needs to experience the loneliness that Christ himself experienced. And I've known this through my time in seminary. I've known this as a priest in an intellectual way. But this was really brought home for me in experience in the summer of 2018. So the summer of 2018 was whenever the Pennsylvania report came out of the sort of ongoing abuse crisis or the revelation of past abuses, and then the whole fallout with the then Cardinal McCarrick. And I remember on one Saturday morning, I went for a run, and when I came home, I was sitting on the back porch, just trying to catch my breath and not keel over. And I remember having a thought that I've had a couple of times since I've been a priest. Whenever bad things happen, I say to myself, I didn't sign up for this. But I always immediately remind myself that I absolutely did. Right? I did sign up for that. I did sign up for the loneliness that I felt in that moment. I did sign up for the persecution that I felt, not because I had done those particular wrong acts, but because I'm a priest and people saw a priest doing those things. Right? And so there was a loneliness that was involved in that feeling. And I also think that priests need to and do at times feel the loneliness of Christ in the Eucharist. Right? How do we feel that loneliness of Christ in the Eucharist? Well, we feel that because if we're doing our jobs, we spend our entire lives teaching and preaching about the faith. We spend our entire lives making Christ present in the Blessed Sacrament. And there are a lot of people who could care less. I remember I was at a school one time, just kind of walking around to different classrooms, and they were watching YouTube videos of just the most bizarre things. People vaping this fake smoke and blowing smoke and having competitions. And these videos had millions of views, millions upon millions of views. And I was just kind of amazed that they were spending their time watching this. And I said, I can say words and transform the bread and wine into the body and blood of Jesus. And there are a whole lot of people that could care less. But these videos of people literally blowing smoke gets millions of views. And so in that lack of care, in that ignorance, the priest ought to feel the loneliness of Christ in the Eucharist. Right? And I think this is important for us to go through, this loneliness that we are experiencing, because we are the ones who have inflicted the pain of loneliness on Christ. In our own sinfulness, we, like Peter, refuse to allow God to serve. In our own sinfulness, we, like Judas, betray Jesus. And some of us for money, right? We're working too much so we can't practice the faith. We leave Mass early so we can get back to work. Right? These are things that we do. When we as priests don't live up to our priestly promises, we inflict that pain of loneliness on Jesus. And so we need to experience that loneliness, and we need to not just wallow in it, but we need to unite it to Christ's loneliness. We need to unite it to Christ's suffering. And so we should spend some time after this Mass, through tomorrow to the Good Friday services, praying and consoling Christ in His loneliness. Right? Remember I said that the loneliness that we're experiencing in this time is a fraction of what He's experiencing. So we need to console Him in His loneliness. We need to be there with Him. Right? We need to offer Him our sadness. You should offer Him your sadness at not being able to receive Him in the Blessed Sacrament. You should offer Him your loneliness in being confined and unable to attend the services, unable to visit with your family and friends, unable to feed on His body, blood, soul, and divinity. And I ask that you offer to Him me, offer to Him Father Rosa, offer to Him all priests, that we might imitate Him in our loneliness, that we might offer our loneliness to Him, and that loneliness offered to Him might become salvific. Right? In this way, we can make up in part for the times that we have abandoned Him. We can make up in part for the times that we have inflicted that loneliness upon Him. And we're able to do this. We're able to keep Him company in the garden as He suffers. We're able to offer Him that loneliness and to comfort Him in that way. Right? The tradition that we have in the Church for this night, which we can't carry out because of these circumstances, is that of adoration. Right? Remembering that Christ was in the garden, praying, begging God if the cup would be able to pass Him, that it would. And as He did that, His best friends fell asleep. They weren't able to keep watch with Him. And so we as the Church keep watch with Christ in adoration. Again, we can't do that this year because of the coronavirus, but we can keep Christ's company in our homes. We can keep Christ's company in our families. And we can and we ought to and we have to keep Christ's company within our own hearts.